in the heart of the Colorado Rockies, where winter's breath carved the pines a razor's edge, Elias Hawthorne stood on the warped porch of his isolated cabin. It was January 1882, and the snow fell in relentless sheets, swirling like a living thing across the jagged peaks. Elias, a man of few words and fewer companions, had carved out a solitary life here for 4 winters. The quiet was a sanctuary, the mountains a shield against a world that asked too much. A fortnight earlier, a letter had arrived, wrapped in waxcloth, its edges frayed but the message clear. A capable woman has been secured for your household needs. She will arrive soon, weather allowing. Duties include cooking and upkeep, payment settled up front. No cancellations upon her arrival. Elias hadn't requested warmth or wit, only someone sturdy enough to endure the high country's bite. He hadn't expected her to come trudging through a blizzard, and certainly not in her condition. Through the veil of snow, he saw her, a lone figure struggling up the ridge, a burlap sack slung over her shoulder, a bundle cradled tightly against her. As she neared, Elias's eyes narrowed. Her cloak was dusted with frost, but it couldn't hide the unmistakable curve of her belly. She climbed the porch steps with measured effort, her breath puffing in the icy air. Her eyes, sharp and guarded, met his. "If you're thinking of sending me back, you'll wait till the thaw," she said, her voice steady despite the shiver in her frame. "I'm not turning around in this." Elias's jaw tightened. "I paid for a worker, not a cradle," he said, his tone even but firm. She didn't blink. "I'm here to work. The child's mine to carry, not yours to question." The wind shrieked around them, a howling witness to their standoff. For a long moment, Elias said nothing. Then, with a quiet grunt, he reached for her sack, his callous hands lifting it with unexpected care. He turned and stepped inside, leaving the door open. She paused, then followed. The cabin was a simple affair. A hearth glowing faintly, a rough-hewn table, a single cot pushed against one wall, and shelves cluttered with jars, tools, and books gathering dust. The air smelled of pine smoke and yesterday's broth. Elias set her bag by the fire, tossed a fresh log into the stove, and watched the flames catch. "Food's in an hour," he said without turning. "Rest till then." Lydia, her name, he'd learned later, nodded silently. She peeled off her snow-dampened shawl, her movements stiff but deliberate, and stood closer to the hearth. One hand hovered near the warmth. The other rested lightly on her belly. Her face was gaunt, etched with lines that spoke of hard years, her lips set in a way that suggested she'd forgotten how to smile. Elias unfolded a quilt from a chair and tossed it toward the cot. "That's yours," he muttered, then busied himself with the stew pot, avoiding her gaze. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, a fragile quiet settled, as if 2 weary souls had agreed to a temporary truce. Winter dragged through February, the snow piling high against cabin's walls, the wind a constant wail. Lydia worked without protest, sweeping the floors, kneading dough, and scrubbing linens despite the weight she carried. Her movements were slow but sure, her hands steady even when her breath hitched from effort. Elias observed her in stolen glances, over his morning coffee, through the barn's slatted door. She never spoke of herself, never lingered on pleasantries. Her room, a small nook near the stove, remained bare. No trinkets, no keepsakes, just a worn satchel and a small prayer book she never opened in his presence. Their words were sparse. "Beets or bread tonight?" she'd ask, and he'd mumble, "Doesn't matter." Or he'd say, "The hens need grain," and she'd nod, rise without comment. It was a brittle peace, but it held. Until one night, when the fire's crackle was the only sound, Elias heard a faint, stifled sob from behind her door. He froze, his axe poised over a log. The sound came again, raw and fleeting, like a wound briefly exposed. He didn't knock. Instead, he crept to the stove, added more wood to keep it burning strong, and left a tin mug of warm water outside her door. By morning, the mug was empty and a shawl, her only one, stained from travel, was draped over a cot, freshly washed and folded. Lydia emerged, her eyes meeting his across the kitchen. "You don't need to be soft," she said, her voice low but firm. "I'm not soft," Elias replied, stirring the fire. "Just practical." There's a difference. She studied him, then gave a single nod and turned to the stove. That evening, she found a book on her cot, an old farmer's almanac, its pages worn but intact, open to a section on childbirth and care. Lydia held it close, her fingers tracing the spine. She didn't thank him, but when she served supper, she set his plate down with a gentleness that hadn't been there before. For the first time, she sat across from him. They ate in silence, the wind battering the windows, but something unspoken had begun to thaw. As March crept in, the snow softened, leaving muddy trails across the porch. Lydia's steps grew heavier, but her hands remained deft, chopping herbs, folding quilts, tending the fire. Elias noticed a change in her, less guarded, her gaze lingering on his when they passed the salt or shared the kettle. One evening, as he carved kindling by the hearth, she sat across from him, her hands folded. "My husband died in a quarry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wrongly accused. They said he stole tools. He didn't. He was protecting me from a foreman with wandering hands." Elias set his knife down, his eyes on the fire. "Go on," he said quietly. "They beat him," she continued. "Broke his jaw, his ribs. He was gone by morning. They gave me his ring, wrapped in a rag, like it was nothing." Her voice wavered, but held. "I never told anyone that. Not till now." Elias poured water into a cup and slid it across the table. She took it, her fingers brushing his. "That kind of pain sticks," he said after a pause. "But up here, it can't chase you as fast." She gave a small, tired smile, the first he'd seen. Days later, in town, whispers followed them. A shopkeeper mentioned a widow from Nebraska whose husband had been killed unjustly. Elias overheard, his shoulders stiffening. At the trading post, he spoke loud enough for the room to hear. "She's in my care. Anyone's got a problem, they answer to me." The murmurs stopped. That night, he saddled her horse, patting the saddle with a quilt his mother had stitched. Lydia noticed her fingers grazing the fabric. "You didn't need to do that," she said. "I know," he replied, turning back to barn. But he began rising earlier to light the fire, setting her boots by the stove, leaving kindling by her door. She, in turn, left a lantern glowing when he returned late from town. Their silences grew warmer, their bond not yet love, but something close, something alive. Spring arrived hesitantly, the snow melting into rivulets that gleamed under the lengthening sun. Lydia moved with care, her belly full and heavy. She still worked, stirring porridge, mending socks, but pain flickered across her face more often now. One morning, as she reached for a basket, she winced, hand pressed at her back. Elias, watching from the porch, said nothing. By noon, a low stool appeared by the wash basin, angled for her comfort. She sat without comment, but her shoulders relaxed. Days later, she called him from the porch. "I need you," she said, her voice calm but firm, holding a scrap of paper. It listed supplies: clean cloth, twine, scissors, a salve. "Ask for Martha in town," she added. "She's a midwife. Tell her it's soon, early June." Elias nodded, pocketing the list. He returned with a sack of linens, a jar of balm, and a small guidebook on birthing. He left them on the table, saying nothing. That night, he sat by the lamp, clumsily cutting strips of soft cloth, his brow creased with effort. Lydia watched from the doorway. "Why all this?" she asked, not accusing, just curious. He paused, his voice low. "Lost a daughter once. Fever took her fast. Her mother, too, not long after. I couldn't do anything then. I can now." Lydia sat across from him, her eyes soft. "I'm sorry," she said. "So am I," he replied. The next day, a cradle appeared by the window, crafted from cedar, lined with a soft blanket. Lydia touched it, her breath catching. But she said nothing. Her eyes spoke enough. The storm hit without warning, a ferocious gale that shook the cabin like a rag doll. Lightning cracked and the wind screamed. Past midnight, Lydia gasped, clutching the table. "It's time," she whispered, her face pale but resolute. Elias sprang up, heart pounding. The midwife was unreachable in this tempest. He cleared the table, gathered blankets, and opened the guidebook, its pages blurring in his panic. Lydia's breaths came sharp, her hands gripping the bed frame. "You'll be fine," he said, voice rough with fear. "Just hold on." Hours bled together. Lydia's face contorted, her cries sharp but controlled. Elias boiled water, swapped cloths, steadied her shoulders. When the moment came, her screams split the night. Then silence, a deafening void. The baby emerged, small, still, not breathing. Elias's heart stopped. He turned the child over, patting gently, then harder. Nothing. The book's words flashed in his mind. Clear the airway. Trembling, he leaned down, drawing fluid from the tiny mouth, spitting it out with a shudder. A faint cough, then a cry, small, fragile, but alive. Elias wrapped the boy in a cloth, placed him on Lydia's chest, and sank to the floor, shaking. Lydia's fingers brushed the baby's cheek, her eyes half closed but bright. Elias stayed by the fire, watching them through the night, too wired to rest. At dawn, he stepped outside, carved a name into a piece of pine, Jasper, and set it by the cradle. It felt new, hopeful. The storm passed, leaving a crystalline calm. Inside, the fire glowed softly. Lydia woke to find Elias in a chair, Jasper nestled in his arms, his low, uneven hum filling the room. A lullaby, rough but tender. She watched, her chest tightening. "You're awake," he said, startled, his voice soft. "You need rest." "I was," she murmured. "Then I heard a song." He flushed, looking away. "Didn't mean to bother you." "You didn't," she said, a faint smile breaking through. "It was good." Later, as Jasper slept, Elias fumbled with a skein of wool, attempting to knit a cap. His fingers were clumsy, the stitches uneven, but he persisted. When Lydia woke, she saw the lopsided hat on Jasper's head and laughed, a bright, unguarded sound that warmed the room. Elias glanced up, sheepish but grinning. "It's not much," he said. "It's enough," she replied, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, the cabin felt less like a refuge and more like a home, built not of wood, but quiet care and shared silences, forged in the crucible of a long winter's grace.